Welcome, citizens of Gotham, to The Fire Rises, a Batman podcast focusing on all things The Dark Knight and the DC Universe. If you'd like to connect with the show, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and X, and Threads at tfrbatpod. And if you have thoughts, questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes of the show, you can shoot us emails. Just send those to tfrbatpod at gmail.com. My name is Eric Carter, and I am your host. And I am joined once again by my co host, my partner in crime, Joe Fornerado. Joe, welcome back, my friend. How are you?
Welcome back, Eric. Thanks for having me for this one. Good to see you.
For sure. And we are in the thick of the holiday season. So happy holidays. Merry Christmas coming
Yes.
up.
Yep. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Happy Superman.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so just a little bit of background on today. So we were actually going to cover another DC TV show, Creature Commandos, because it just started. And I just, after watching the first two episodes, I thought, regardless of what I think of this show, I just feel like it's December, it's Christmas time, something family oriented feels a little more appropriate for this time of year. So that's why I made the switch.
Yeah, I have no problem with it. I though Creature Commandos is its own little bizarre family, I guess you could say, or maybe they're moving towards that. Maybe.
Sure, we'll get there. We'll
Yeah.
discuss it, but not on this episode. Of course, if you guys have looked at the episode title, you know what we're talking about today, but we're not quite ready to get there yet. Of course, I do have to mention our partner sponsor in Organic Priced Books. It is the holiday season. You guys have just a few days left to get those orders in to make sure, as I'm sure your browsers are telling you on every store that you go to. You've got a few days left to get in those orders so they will arrive by Christmas. And if you've got a geeky, nerdy friend or family member or loved one in your life, Organic Price Books is the place to get you a hookup. You can go to the link in the description of this podcast and go straight to their website. Use our promo codes. The first is tfrbatpod for $2 off of any order. And the second, tfrbatpod ship it together for 5% off any order of three or more books. They have everything that you guys are looking for, whether it be Marvel, DC, Boom Studios, IDW, Dynamite. They have the big guys, they have the independents, and they are an independent. They're a small business, family owned and operated. So go check them out. Save yourself some money on those hard to find books, those omnibus absolutes, things like that, and support this show as you do so. But Joe, today we are here to talk about a show that I'll be quite honest. I am shocked where it lands for me as an entry into comics lore, as just I don't even know how to express how I feel about this show yet. But without further ado, we are here today to talk about Superman and Lois. Okay, Joe. So this show started 2021, I believe. Is that the first year?
Um, Let me see. I have it up right now. That sounds right, unless it was fall of 2020. Nope,
Nope.
2021.
February 23rd,
Yep.
2021. Yep. So You know very well that while I very much enjoyed the early episodes of Arrow, the first few seasons, I fell off of the DC on the CW, the Arrowverse as it were, pretty quickly. I did not stick with most of the shows. I would pop in annually for like the crossovers when they did those. I would check out the crossovers, but as a whole, if I'm honest, when they announced this show, I don't know if you remember this or not, but they used posters of Superman and Lois Lane from the Arrowverse.
Hmm.
They were shots from Supergirl or whatever,
Probably the crossovers.
probably.
Yeah.
But they didn't have anything with the new suits or costumes. They were just announcing the show.
Hmm.
And when I saw the images, nothing got me excited. I was like, oh, okay, another Arrowverse show is probably going to be bad effects, bad storytelling, cringy, you know, soap opera CW stuff. How wrong I was. This show, I don't even, I think it was, I do remember what it was. You know what it was? It was that first trailer that we got for this show. And I remember thinking, wow, they're doing something completely different for this. But now I want your perspective just very early on, not the show itself, but your thoughts when you heard that Tyler Hoechlin and Bitsy Tulloch and they were getting this team together and they were doing a Superman and Lois show on the CW. What did you think?
I was pretty excited about it from day one. Ironically, though, like you talk about how you had fallen off of the Arrowverse. I think even from the beginning of our friendship, I think even at that point, I had kind of fallen off from the Arrowverse because I think Arrow had pretty much ended before we had really become good friends, if I remember right. Or it might have just been in the final season with the Crisis, but I don't even remember discussing Crisis with you that much when it was airing.
Crisis was definitely something. It was a crisis was going on early
Okay.
on, and in you and I being acquainted, because I
Yeah.
do remember talking about Crisis briefly.
But even like, I mean, it's hard to, discuss this show without talking about our relationship with the Arrowverse in general. And I definitely stuck around longer than you did. Um, but even I fell off from the last two seasons of The Flash. I never finished The Flash. I didn't finish the last two seasons of Supergirl.
Oh,
Um,
really? I didn't know that because I know you liked Supergirl
I
quite a
loved
bit.
the first three seasons of Supergirl. Um,
Mm.
I struggled through the fourth, and I fell off in the fifth and the sixth. Um, the first season of Supergirl, I had told you I went to Los Angeles. I was lucky enough to take a tour of the sets from the early season of Supergirl. The first season was filmed in LA because it was on CBS. They were really pushing Supergirl. But the budget was a little too high on CBS. I guess they weren't getting the viewers they needed, and that's when it went back to CW. But I was lucky enough to see the original sets from when they were filming in LA and all that. I saw the pilot at New York Comic Con of Supergirl before anyone else did.
Wow.
Um, yeah, it was. I had a lot of fond memories of Supergirl and the Flash. The first few seasons were unbelievable. I actually, as much as I love the Flash, I actually am shocked to admit this that I think Arrow is the only one that really stayed as consistent as possible throughout the whole eight seasons. And I think it has to do with the effects and maybe the lower budget because it's more of a street level thing or what have you.
Sure.
Um, After watching Superman and Lois, going back to watch The Flash is tough because it is very cheesy and very soap opera-esque. And I don't think that's fair to do the comparison because I think Superman and Lois is doing its own thing. But I was really surprised at how my perspective on the Flash has unfortunately, diminished a little bit. Um,
Hmm.
which I still respect the hell out of that show, and I think the first two, three seasons were unbelievable. But just not the same mindset anymore that I have going into it because what Superman and Lois accomplished spinning out of those shows, but not, I guess, being married to everything those shows did
Yeah.
is really admirable. And again, I was definitely more positive going into it than you. And as much as I love the show, and this is not to take anything away from my love for the show, the love you have for this show, I can't even compete with because I know how much you love this show. And it is definitely weird. And maybe it's because of how much you grew to have so much disdain for the other shows that like you appreciate this more. But I don't, you know, I love that this show has grabbed you as much as it did, and I like that the show did its own thing.
Hmm.
And we can get into more of um the way it did its own thing, the way it kind of distanced itself from the Arrowverse. Just while I'm thinking about it, something that popped into my head today because I saw a picture of it. I totally forgot that Superman and Lois get engaged in one of the crossovers on the Arrowverse, in the Arrowverse.
Yeah, I
But
didn't
it's
remember that.
not, but it's not obviously the same because
Hmm.
they're so far aged up in this show. And that should have been like the first sign that these are not the same two characters that were in the Arrowverse. But like I was one of those people that was like, no, 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 it's still the same. It's still the same. It's still, branching off from that. And then they pretty much did their own thing pretty early on to, cement that.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I was not excited at all. And to be honest with you, like I remember watching Teen Wolf on MTV, and Tyler Hoechlin was on that show. And it was kind of similar to the Arrowverse shows. Had a really good first and second season, and then it got really, really bad. So when I saw Tyler Hoechlin as Superman in some of the crossovers and things like that, I I couldn't see Superman. Like I could see this werewolf character from this other show that was real, teeny bopper TV show, but
Mhm.
I couldn't see Superman. And to be frank, I hated the suit from the Arrowverse. I hate the big straps. It looks like pleather. I'm not a fan of that
Mhm.
suit. So there was nothing to invest me in Tyler Hoechlin as Superman. So when I figured out he was getting his own show, I was very hesitant. I didn't even know if I was going to watch it. But then again, that trailer came out, and I remember specifically you and I talking about this trailer when it was coming out because we felt like there was obvious Man of Steel vibes from the
Yeah, I
trailer
do remember that. You're right.
because there was a sepia tone over the trailer.
Hmm.
They had a sweeping score to it. It didn't sound like anything from the Arrowverse. The aspect ratio didn't look the same. I mean, it looked like it was shot on a bigger budget just from the trailer.
Yeah, what's it called? CinemaScope. It's definitely
Yeah.
it's a more widescreen presentation.
So just from that trailer, I got very invested.
In
And
all
then,
fairness, Batwoman is filmed in this ratio too, so I wouldn't use that as an argument, but
well, compare, and I didn't watch Batwoman, so I can't speak on that.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, so this, of course, it launched in February of 2021. This show, it goes to show how much I loved it because there were early on in the first two seasons, if you'll remember, there was some insane delays between episodes.
that's right. And I thought about that. I loved that this final season had no delays. There were no
Mhm.
gaps at all.
I don't think season three did either. But season one and two had crazy big gaps in between episodes
I
at
feel like season
times.
three might have had like a week or two here or there, but never like big gaps. There was no like hiatus or anything like that.
Yeah. Um, but it kept me invested, and I was actually angry when I didn't have another episode the next week. So that goes to show you right there. But this is, I mean, still developed by Greg Berlanti and Todd Helbing. We do have Tyler Hoechlin and Elizabeth Tulloch. And then you have the cast of characters. You have Wally Parks, that is Steel, John Henry Irons. Dylan Walsh, for me, was a standout as General Lane. But the boys, Man, the boys had a huge impact on me as well because
Hmm.
I thought early on in season one, I thought they were going to be the irritating CW part of the show.
Yeah.
And at moments, they did have some of those tendencies. But Jordan Elsis and Alex Garfin, and then later Michael Bishop, who took over from Jordan Elsis, I thought they did a really fantastic job in this show as Superman's sons. The family dynamic, I think, is one of my favorite parts. I think that it says a lot about this show that when you're not looking at Superman things on the screen, you're still invested because of how much you care about this family unit. So yeah, I think that's the hook for me was the family and this being on the Kent farm. Um, but yeah, I mean, just overall, to put 4 seasons in a little short span is very hard to do. Is it's very hard to cover and say everything that we absolutely want to say about this show, but we're going to do our best. The main primary focus of this episode, a lot of it's going to be based on the final season, but I don't want to forget what came before. So I just want to get kind of a an overall vibe, Joe. If you had to sum up this show and your feelings on it in just a brief synopsis, what would you say about Superman and Lois?
I would say that this show is a very special adaptation of a ton of different versions of the character.
Hmm.
Um, and just because I'm thinking about it now because of what you just said, where it, was 4 seasons. Here's what's even crazier. You know how many total episodes the show had? 35.
Yeah,
One season of Arrow was 23 episodes or 24 episodes. This is a perfect example. I'm sorry. Wow, that was wrong.
50,
53.
53.
53. I was
Yeah.
a little dyslexia coming in. Sorry, but 53. So, but just it goes to show you the shortened seasons make it so much more focused and so much more of a, it's easier to get invested in whatever storylines you're getting because everything is so focused. Everything is so important. And I love that they didn't, and the later seasons even more so because the first season is the longest. I think the first season was 15 episodes. Um, yeah, okay, so the first 2 seasons were 15 and then the third was 13 and then we only got 10.
Mhm.
Um, and I would argue that even the first season there were a couple of like filler episodes in there. I
Mhm.
don't remember a lot about the second. I remember the second season being a little bit of a drop off from the first, but the third and fourth seasons were near perfect in my eyes for how they told the stories.
Hold on
But
to
I
that because I got a question I'm gonna spring on you later.
okay, but I think just the way this show never tried to pick a tone, they balance every aspect of the character so well. You get the serious stuff, you get the heartfelt stuff, you get the sentimental stuff, you get for lack of a better term, I know it's become such a cliche, but you get the smiling Superman, but you also get the serious one, the heartbroken one, the one that's going through turmoil. You get all this, and I love that the show is Superman and Lois. The show is about them. The show is about their family. Um, and that's what separated this show from everything else is the fact that they had kids, and this is the only time I remember them ever having two children as far as I know, right? Because that was a big deal when the show was announced. It was like, oh, we're getting, a super son. No, no, we're getting two sons and we're getting twins.
Mhm.
And they played a lot around with which kid was going to get the powers. And it was totally a fake out in the first season because everyone expected um, Jonathan to be the one to get the powers.
Mhm.
And I remember me and you joking about this, and I don't remember if you knew or I didn't. I definitely did not. I never put two and two together that Jordan was Jor-El. Like Jordan was the named after Jor-El, John was named
Jonathan
after
was named
Jonathan. Like I
after
never put that
Jonathan
together.
Kent.
I thought that was so clever. Um, but yeah, there's just it's hard to pinpoint what this show was taking influence from, because I think it took influence from every aspect of Superman. There's clearly the Christopher Reeve influence. There's clearly um the Henry Cavill influence. And when I say that, I mean not necessarily the portrayal, but the actual films. Um
The
and
style.
yeah. And then the comic influence with the way the Suns are getting their powers is clearly a take from, the what was it, Gleason and Patrick Gleason and who? I can't remember the other creative. But anyway, Patrick Gleason was the one that wrote Super Sons, I believe. Um, but I just love that they really put a lot of love into every version of this character. And they didn't, leave anything out. They weren't afraid to get too serious, but they weren't afraid to show the charming side of Superman either. Um, and to say that about a CW show, which is sometimes so on the nose,
Hmm.
even in the seasons that I love of The Flash, I'm telling you, I went back and watched an episode from season 2 yesterday because there's a Christmas episode in season 2. And I was like, oh, let me go check this out. I haven't watched this, the show in a while. Um, you don't realize how different it is. Like this, it's hard to even categorize. Like it has CW aspects to it. I'm not gonna make this out to be like this, you know, like it's completely off the rails of anything the CW did. But I think it just handles it better. And again, I don't want to slam the Flash or slam Arrow because I do love those shows still. Um,
Yeah,
but
I
it's just
mean,
different.
yeah, for sure. And just to go ahead and get some nitpicks out of the way, because there's not going to be a lot of them. I just want to go ahead and address them. There was some of the CW-ness here and there. There was sometimes where I felt they lingered a little too long on the Cushings, aka the Cortez
Hmm.
family, with their struggle. And sometimes you were very invested in that story. So it's hard to, you know, it's hard to say when the amount was too much.
Yeah, it's hard,
Um,
and not to cut you off, but like it's hard to say I will agree with you. But then to say that, and then those are the characters that make me cry sometimes the most on this show, which
yeah,
it's like, okay, so yes, you probably made that the most CW aspect of your show, but it worked. So you did it well. You took an aspect that you probably, forced in there, but you did it well enough to make me invested. And I think that's important if you're going to do that.
for sure. Yeah. And and then there was some moments early on. I would say they
Mhm.
really stopped doing this later, but some moments with the teenagers got a little CW for
Yeah,
me.
the boyfriend girlfriend stuff, and yeah,
Some of that
the
stuff.
relationship stuff. Yes.
But then there's moments where like a season 1 side story that I thought was excellent was no, excuse me, it is season 2. A season 2 side story that I thought was great was the jealousy that Jonathan has with Jordan having the powers,
Yeah.
and he turns to drugs. He turns to X kryptonite to kind of get an edge on the football field and also to compete with Jordan,
Hmm.
which is so fascinating because he's not the son you would think would have the jealous issues because he's always had everything.
There's a great play on the two of them because putting the more insecure son, the one that's a little bit more awkward, the one that definitely has some confidence issues and all that, he's the one that gets the powers, therefore making the more popular, confident son the one that becomes more insecure because he wishes he had the powers. It's showing that anyone can go through that, the insecurities of being a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
Being uncomfortable in your own skin, even if you are the popular one or, the one with superpowers, you still are going through issues. And I think that's what's so cool about the show is they're showing real human struggles with these superhuman characters. And that's such a cliche, but that's what it's doing. And it's showing the family aspect. And we haven't even gotten to Lois yet in all this talk. And Lois is one of the most, arguably the most important character on the show.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a reason that this show is called Superman and Lois, because Lois, man, she would, I mean, and not in a, I don't know how you say this, but not in a
Mm,
bad way, I guess, but she would irritate me at times. And then she would rip my heart out
hmm.
the next moment. And not when I say irritate, like not that I didn't want to watch her, but just, just the situation, I guess, that she was in. Or,
Oh yeah.
there was moments with, I mean, the Lane family had a very interesting dynamic in this show. Seeing the arc between Lois and Sam Lane
Hmm.
throughout this show is fantastic.
Oh, I forgot about her
Um,
sister too.
yeah, Lucy was a big part of season two. Um, but yeah, I mean, just we could talk for hours, honestly, about this show.
Yeah, it's hard to focus when, there's, again, 4 seasons,
Hmm.
um, four
53 episodes.
excellent seasons, and covered so many different bases of the characters, and I love that, a lot of the times we can um complain that these shows take liberties, or oh, why are you doing that villain? Like, there's so many different villains in the comics you could choose. Why are you doing a storyline we've never seen before? Just stick to the comics. Adapt what we love. This show turned things on its head, and I mean, the whole um Doomsday Bizarro twist in season 3, and that not even being the most important storyline in season 3, that being almost a side story to Onomatopoeia, Bruno Mannheim, and Lois's breast cancer. Like,
Hmm.
think about that. They weaved all those storylines together in a 13 episode season, and it was damn near perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was the second time they had subverted expectations with Bizarro and Doomsday. Because in season two, we thought we were getting Doomsday.
So I thought that was the beginning of season 3.
Mm-mm. In season two, we had the creature in the mine that was trying to break through, and he was in the suit from the death of Superman. The
Yeah, wasn't that the beginning of season 3? That was the beginning of
No, that's
season
season
2?
two. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then I'm confusing myself then. So he goes away for season 3.
Yeah, you don't see him until
Okay,
close
so
to
I'm
the end
wrong.
of
So okay,
season
so
three.
that was the main story of season 2 then with Bizarro.
Hmm.
Okay, so season 2 is the storyline with the weird other dimension, and yeah, you're right. Okay. With the weird other dimension and Bizarro and all that. Okay. So that,
And Ali Alston.
without burying the lead, that's probably my least favorite of the storylines of all 4 seasons. But it's still pretty damn good. And the whole misdirection with Bizarro and Doomsday was really smart. And then to evolve that character into Doomsday in the long run was even more smart. Just a way to do that was really cool.
Well, since you're trying to bury the lead, deal, we'll go ahead and do this. So the question I was going to spring on you, as organically as you can, rank
Rank the
the
seasons.
seasons.
That's tough because 3 and 4 are definitely more fresh in my mind.
Hmm.
But I would, and the finale is so damn strong. Three Season 3 might be one of the most emotional roller coasters, the biggest emotional roller coaster I've ever gone on in a show, in a
Hmm.
season of a show. Um, the sad part with season 3 is that that's the hardest one for me to rewatch. So
Yeah,
I would say it's my number one, but it might be the one I go back to the least because it is such
interesting.
a gut wrench to watch that season. And then to know what happens to Lois in the finale makes it harder now.
Hmm.
I
Sure.
you could say that that's kind of glossed over in the finale, but I don't think that was the purpose of that. I think it's to show how real the struggle was. Um, but and again, tangent. I'm gonna be tangent galore here. So I would go 3, 4, 1, 2.
Interesting. Okay. For
But I
me,
haven't watched 1 and 2 since they came out. I never rewatched them. So
I'm right in the middle of rewatching it right now
okay, because
because
it's hard for me to remember most about what, because I wasn't crazy about the villain in one, because
yeah.
it's like Zod, but it's not. Um,
So I'm about halfway through season two on
mhm.
rewatch right now because and that when I got to the end, I mean the season finale, the series finale, emotionally devastated me so much that I needed more of the show. So
Yeah,
I started the rewatch.
yeah.
So like I said, I'm about halfway through season two. For me right now, it would go. My number one is season four. My number two is season one.
Okay,
My number three is season three, and then two is season two is my fourth.
okay.
Um, but the
And I would have to
margin,
rewatch one because I don't
yeah,
remember enough about one.
the margin between the first season and the third season is like razor thin for me. Like those
And it
could flip
wouldn't,
flop.
I, and it's funny because I don't remember enough about one, I guess, but I can't imagine one ever topping three for me because I'm
Yeah,
coming off of three, the emotional aspect of three.
I think what pushes season one over
Season one is more of like a comic book blast from what I
it is,
remember.
but what edges it just a little bit for me is, I mean, season one's how I mean, I fell in love with the show.
Hmm.
I mean, for a network and a property that I didn't think I could enjoy, it made me love it. So for that, I mean, that's a bit, it's sentiment, it's a sentimental value
Yeah.
a lot for the season one. Season one has some stuff that needs fixing for
Mhm.
sure. It's about 2 episodes to 3 episodes too long, because they kind of fake you out in episode 13 because that could have been the ending, and then they kind of go 2 more episodes. And I think we talked about that. You and I talked about that when it was first airing. We were like, probably could have shortened this a little bit,
Hmm.
but still, I mean, I still love it. So yeah, for me, 4-1-3-2. Now, and Tauro was the villain you were trying to think of. Tauro was the
Yes.
villain in season one,
Who's like a
Superman's
combination
brother,
of the Eradicator and Zod and
and is somehow Superman's brother. Yeah.
yeah, that was all that felt a little too much of we have to do our own thing instead of using established characters.
But they did give him a pretty noble send off in season two with the
Yes.
whole Allie Ouston stuff. So,
You know, my problem most of the time is my memory is really bad. And
yeah,
when these shows have big gaps between seasons, I like forget everything. And that's the plus and minus of not having gaps within the season is you have longer gaps when the season's over to the next season. Um, and I don't think I ever rewatched a season of these going into the next one.
yeah. So, and here's my next interesting question for you. I'm not going to make you rank them because that's not nice and not fair, especially
Oh,
off the
geez, the
cuff.
characters.
No, not the characters. Well, somewhat the characters. So, your villains for this
Hmm.
series,
Yeah.
you've got Tauro,
Hmm.
Allie Ouston.
Allie Allison
Was
is the woman in the second season.
she's Parasite? Yeah,
I don't even think I ever caught that she was Parasite.
yeah. So
Okay.
that's one
That's
of the
why
alter egos of
that
Parasite.
season didn't really do much for me, but okay.
Okay, so Tauro, Ali Alston, Bizarro. You have and I'm just going major villains because we did get some minors sprinkled throughout here.
Yeah. Bruno.
You got Bruno Mannheim. You have Automatopoeia,
Hmm.
Doomsday, and Lex Luthor. Who is your favorite villain of Superman and Lois?
I like the complex nature of Bruno, and I put them together. Bruno Mannheim and Onomatopoeia. I love or Pia as she was in this. I love the complex nature of the two of them. The whole dynamic of Lois putting Lex in jail for a crime that Bruno Mannheim committed, and that leading into season four. But I love the complex nature of Lois being best friends with this woman going through chemo and then finding out she's the villain, and because I did not see that coming when it was happening. Um, the whole deal with God, we haven't even gotten to John Henry Irons and his daughter. Um, but his daughter dating Bruno Mannheim's son.
In
That
season
was
three.
there were so many fun little twists in season three. Um, I would have to. I mean, that to me, if I had to pick one, it would be I'll say Bruno Mannheim. But Lex was so good in season four. Doomsday being the mindless monster that he is was pretty perfect. The whole thing with him being part Bizarro and Lois getting through to him was a little, eh. That might be a CW type thing for me. I wasn't crazy about that whole thing.
I loved that.
Oh yeah, I don't know.
I loved that, and I thought it had a great payoff at the end with like the final confrontation between him and Superman.
Well, I like when it doesn't work at the end. Like she did it the first time, and then the
Yeah.
second time, okay, he's gone now. There's no more Bizarro left. He's just the mindless monster at this point.
Except for the when he gets the bonk on the head from the hammer. Because I loved
Mm.
his little ending part there where he remembered who he was
Hmm.
and sacrificed himself to stop from being that monster. I really thought, as much as Bizarro wasn't my favorite part of the series as a whole, I liked the little ending that they gave him.
Hmm.
I liked the emotional send off that that version of Superman got
Yes.
in the finale.
Yep. And I think that's
But
where the rewatch would definitely help that pay off more for me.
yeah, because I mean, he is much more compelling in season two than Allie Alston is. I
Oh,
mean,
100%. 100%.
seeing the inverse world and what happened on that Earth.
Yes. The origin of him was really compelling.
Yeah, yeah, and just how that. I mean, as great as the family dynamic was on the regular Earth and Superman
Hmm.
and Lois, that inverse was a nightmare. I
Yep.
mean, it was horrible. So to see him kind of get a noble ending, I thought was a cool tying up of that story.
Yeah.
But for me, as much as I just talked about how much I like Bizarro and Doomsday and that ending there, it could be recency bias. Ask me in a year, it could
Hmm.
be different. But for me, it's Lex.
Yeah.
I I just thought he did. I thought Michael Cudlitz did such a great job, and I understand. I've heard some complaints about Biker Lex and all this,
Yeah.
but
Again, it's another take on Lex. Why can't we just get Lex? I
sure,
understand that
yeah,
argument. I'm not saying that myself. I understand that argument though. To me, even with the quote unquote take on Lex that this is, just because he's got the beard to me, take away the beard like they do, he becomes to me the comic Lex. It's a
yeah,
different take based on like that's the one thing I wasn't crazy about with Lex, and I'm sorry to cut you off. I know I'm going on another tangent and it's just your time to talk. But like
that's okay.
the it doesn't seem like him and Superman had an ongoing feud. It seems like he was in jail pretty quickly.
Well, and that's one of the most interesting things about this because again, it's the show is Superman and Lois.
Hmm.
It
Oh
seemed in
yeah.
this series that he's more of
Yes.
Lois's foe than he
100%.
is
Yep.
Superman's, which I kind of liked. But here's the thing. You know how I feel about Michael Rosenbaum. I
Hmm.
adore Michael Rosenbaum as Lex. I think Michael Cudlitz was the most menacing Lex Luthor I have seen on screen.
We got more of Lex Luthor being evil in this show than we did on Smallville. I'm sorry. Like I
No, we
know
did.
I know I'm the Smallville nitpick guy when it comes to that stuff because I don't get the love fest for Michael Rosenbaum's Lex because I don't think we got enough evil Lex. I think we got too much of the back and forth friend not friend Lex, where in this show he's just an evil bastard. Like there's
Yeah.
no I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, I wish we got more of a conclusion to the daughter storyline. I feel like she kind of disappeared and never came back. But when he cuts
Well, I
her
felt
off,
like that was the conclusion.
oh yeah, that is the yeah, like she leaves because he chooses his vendetta against Lois over her, which I guess is the point. Um, yeah, it's pretty evil. Like it doesn't get much more evil than that.
Yeah.
I was
And I
worried they
just,
were going to make him sympathetic. I was so worried they were going to make him a sympathetic villain, and I'm glad they didn't.
no, they didn't. And I mean, he out and out, I mean, he murdered Superman in this show. Of course, because it's a comic book show, Superman came back. Um,
He gets murdered a lot.
the moment, the moment I think biggest jaw dropping moment for me is not even when he murdered Superman, but when because he's there's this whole side plot about Superman's heart.
Hmm.
in this in the final season. And when Jordan in his little vigilante mode goes to try to steal the heart back, steal Superman's heart, I think that was the biggest jaw-dropping moment for me is when he stomped on the heart cuz I was like, what do we do? I mean, I knew they would find a solution, but at
Yes.
that moment I'm like, what do we do here?
Well, it was a saving moment for me because I was like, oh, this is a really dumb MacGuffin. Like his heart, and then they got to get the heart back, and then they get the heart back, and I'm like, this is so stupid. When he stomped on the heart, I'm like, oh, okay, now we're going somewhere.
Yeah,
And while
exactly.
we're on that, talk about an evil bastard. Making Lois choose between Jordan and Jonathan, and then
Yes.
playing it back to the son that she chose against. And
Hmm.
as a parent, I understand where Lois is coming from. The rational decision is choose the one with the powers because you just pray that if I have to choose one, he's got a better chance of surviving.
Hmm.
And but you also see as a kid, as a teenager who's already insecure, who's already worried about the approval of his parents, like what an evil thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like like
Lex
you're
is a
just
in this show he's
watching
a
that, you're
bastard.
just miserable.
But also like he always felt like a threat in
Yes,
the show.
he was scary. As a superhero with absolutely no, I mean, as a villain with no powers, he was scary as hell every time he was on screen. You never knew what he was thinking, what he was going to do.
And for the very first time, we saw Lex in a power suit. And
Yeah.
we saw Superman fight Lex Luthor in a power suit
Yep. In live action.
in live action. We've never seen that before.
And
And
would
who
you
knows
ever
if
have
we'll see it again.
thought on the CW it would look as good as it did? Or
Right?
as accept like it, we've seen some pretty chintzy effects, and on the CW it's kind of like you almost just put blinders on with it because you're just happy you're watching a superhero show. But when you like I don't think I ever realized how bad the effects were until like a friend of mine turned it on, and he was like not a superhero guy, and he's like, dude, this is what you watch on Monday nights? Like what like he was watching The Flash or Supergirl. He's like, you watch this? Like this is really bad. And I'm like, well, I don't really think about it when I'm watching it. I don't like really critique the effects. But in this show,
To
they do a good job.
to that point, let's just give the the effects team, their pat on the back here because
They
on the
don't make it
budget that
look
they had,
cheesy.
not only that, they put a lot of these effects and creatures and things like that in daylight in this season,
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, they
which
pick their moments with
which
Doomsday, I think.
a lot of shows will mask that with only
Yes.
putting those creatures at night.
Or finding like at least I think in this show they found ways to put him in shadow or something if it was during the day or hiding the daylight a little bit. But you're right, it always looks worse in the daytime.
Yeah, but I mean, there was some full-on shots of
Hmm.
Doomsday. There was one in the trailer for the series finale
Hmm.
where they just show Doomsday. He's standing in the street. It's broad daylight, and you're like,
Yeah.
okay, I see what you're doing. Good on you.
They, I think
Now,
because they
is
focus on
it?
the design more than they do the polishing of the effects. And I think if you nail the design, people will forgive the effects.
Yeah. Now, again, is it blockbuster movie effects? No, but I'm impressed with what they did, and not just in the finale, in the entire series.
But to
I
to that
thought,
point, with Doomsday, a lot of people critique, the comparisons of Doomsday in this to like Smallville or to BVS. I think the CGI is obviously better in BVS. But people will fault the CGI in BVS because they don't like the design. Where in this, they nailed the design so perfectly that people are more forgiving of the CGI. And I think
mhm,
that's important sometimes.
yeah, for
So
sure. I mean, this is the best Doomsday, I mean, looks wise, that we've ever had on screen.
most comics accurate, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and the Doomsday from Krypton looks really good. I'll give them that. But I mean, this,
Oh yeah, yeah, that one might be the
um,
most comics accurate.
and I mean, like I said, not just this season. I was just watching an episode the other day from season 1 or 2, but it's where Superman was saving a submarine, a Korean sub.
Hmm.
The effects looked fantastic. of Superman flying across the sky with a submarine,
Hmm.
carrying a submarine. It looked great.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, they did this. Now, granted, this TV show had a much higher budget than the rest of the, or quote unquote, Arrowverse. This isn't part of the Arrowverse, but you're talking this show had $5 million per episode, which for a CW TV show is insane.
What did the Flash have? Like two and a half? I have no idea. Like I don't even know what that number means.
From what I understand, and don't quote me on this, but the highest average episode before this show was Arrow, and that was roughly 2 million an episode.
Okay, so then that justifies to me why the Flash looks like it does. And why would Arrow get a bigger budget than the Flash? That doesn't even make sense to me. But
Because it pulled in the most viewers.
yeah, and I that's even harder to justify this show because now we're in a time where nobody gets viewership. I mean, this
No.
doesn't even get half the viewership that Arrow got in its prime because just nobody watches TV anymore. It's a totally different world. But like you and me, we bought this show every night on Prime
Mm-hmm.
or iTunes, wherever, we purchased this show every night to watch it because we didn't like when my streaming service didn't have the CW at the time. So I purchased it on Prime every night to watch it the next day because I wasn't missing it. This is the first season I actually had the CW to watch it on, and I thought about purchasing it anyway. I'm waiting for the complete series to come out on Blu-ray next year, and I can't wait to own it.
Oh, I've pre-ordered. I
One
just,
thing I have noticed the suit evolved subtly, but when you go back to watch season one, the padding in that suit in season one is rough.
it is. It
I
is
didn't
that.
realize it until just now. Like the padding in season one, they really tried to bulk him up too much, it looks like, because he looks great in the season four. You didn't need to do that.
Well, and I meant to bring that up in my nitpicks. The first season and part of the second season, the suit is so puffy
Hmm.
and padded. But I think that's because the CW got a lot of flack for how quote unquote skinny Hoagland looked in Supergirl. 'Cause from
Oh,
what I
okay.
understand, they got a lot of he's too skinny to be Superman. He's too small.
Yeah.
Um,
Then there's the argument that people say, why does Superman have to be muscular? There's no reason for him to be muscular.
yeah. So, but I think they struck a balance in season three where the suit just looks fantastic.
Hmm.
I think from season three on, that suit just looks great. And then since we're
And
going to talk about
the
suits,
suit,
let's.
I still think the suit's fine in season one and two. I don't really have
It
that much of
is.
an
It
issue
is
with it.
just too
Yeah.
puffy. Um, what about the Fleischer suit in the pilot?
It's such a cool homage, and the fact that they really did make a suit just for that one little scene. Well, excuse me, because they could have just digitally done it, but he is wearing the Fleischer suit.
Yeah, and it's puffy as heck too. Let's just go ahead and put that
I,
out
I
there.
honestly don't remember it being as puffy as this one.
It's super puffy, but the way it looks, I think,
It's really
hides it a
cool.
little more than the very textured suit that he wears
Hmm.
later. But just that whole, not only the Fleischer suit, but the sequence that they use it for.
So fun. Yeah.
Ma Kent giving him the suit, the homage to Action Comics #1 with the green car, the kid from
Hmm.
what is that Superman for All Seasons with the hat? I think it
Oh,
is.
maybe. I don't remember.
Where his hat blows off. I think that's from Superman for All Seasons. And then you get a follow up in season one where you flash back to Superman and or Clark Kent and Lois Lane meeting,
Hmm.
and they go back to that whole pilot scene for you get that whole you get a several minute sequence of Superman in his early days in
I
Metropolis.
forgot about the whole flashback episode.
Yeah,
That episode is incredible. That was my favorite episode of that season.
where
Um,
she interviews Superman.
yes. And
So
then,
good.
I mean, you could just pick little moments out that I could talk about for hours, but the whole opening, like, montage of the pilot. I mean,
Oh,
I was like in tears and the show didn't even start yet. The
yeah.
music, the theme going while that montage is happening, and then, you know, the whole monologue and everything, it's just beautiful. And it just it's weird when you can watch a show that you have no love for this particular version of the character, but the show grabs you with your love for the character in general and pulls you in such a smart way that it like you're hooked from literally the first scene. And I think that's
Hmm.
what the show did really well in that pilot.
Yeah, and shout out to Dan Romer, who did the music, that he's a
Composer.
composer for this show. I love the music for this
Yeah.
show. I love the main theme. It's not what you immediately think of as Superman, but this version specifically with the family and the Smallville vibes, it fits so good. It's
Hmm.
perfect. Um and in the final season, he used it in so many different ways during action moments where you
Hmm.
heard the beats of the main theme, but it was more of an action esque style.
Hmm.
I thought that was another big step up from the other CW shows because I don't remember anything super memorable except for the Arrow theme from
Hmm.
the CW. So yeah, just I thought that was another thing where they just really decided they were going to step up the production value here. Um, I do want, since you brought them up a few minutes ago, I do want to discuss John Henry and Natalie because I mean, John was sort of the antagonist for the first half of season one
Yeah.
because you didn't know who he was. You just had this guy in the suit. There was the misdirect of the Captain Luther thing, which I had forgotten about
I
until I just
honestly
did
was
this rewatch.
I was wondering at first if they were gonna make him Lex and they were gonna make him their version of Lex, which the actor is so good. I could have bought him as Lex, like absolutely. Um, but he became kind of the heart of the show at points. You know,
Hmm.
the whole thing with Lois being his wife on that Earth and being killed by Superman, and it's
The image of Lois on that rooftop and the
brutal.
evil Superman flying up behind her, and you
Yeah.
just see the eyes, and then it
Hmm.
cuts away. It's terrifying.
Yeah. So and getting, you know, him to be such a big part of the show going forward, him being basically his partner, like their version of like the little mini Justice League that they had kind of going.
Hmm.
You know, we're working for the
The DOD.
DOD. Um, you know, it's really hard to touch on every little thing on this show in just our short podcast. But man, I just love the character. I love the dynamic with his daughter and the turmoil they go through in trying to be friendly or, you know, family with this version of Lois.
Oh yeah,
And
the
seeing,
cliffhanger of Natalie showing up
oh, I
at the
forgot
end of
she doesn't
season
show
one.
up until the end of season one. What a rough, like out of nowhere. Didn't expect that. And then you know, the up and the back and forth they go through in season two. And I love that they made it, they didn't draw it out too much, but you understood where both characters were coming from between her and Lois.
Hmm.
I think that's what's good about this show is anything they did that may have been a little CW-esque, it never out it never wore out its welcome. They always wrapped it up or at least got you invested enough to understand where they were coming from in doing it. I mean, even the Cushing
Yeah,
stuff was the same way. They focused on them just enough to make you care. They went
yeah.
a little weird with them, but I mean, well, we're on John Henry Irons, so I actually think making him in a relationship with Lana worked towards the end.
I did too. You can
It could have
definitely
been a
tell that they didn't have the time to develop it that they wanted to
exactly,
because
but I
season
think they
four,
you
yeah,
saw the hints of it without a doubt. You knew it was
hmm,
coming, but you're right. Like to end on the wedding, it seems like it rushed a little bit, but I thought it was earned enough because we knew they were strapped for time in the final season that I was glad that they found ways to focus on the side characters in the final season.
well, when they did that 1 year time jump in the finale,
Yeah.
in the series finale, and it was John and Lana's wedding. At first, I was like, uh, this is what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
And then Bitsy Tillich sold me on it
Yeah.
with her address to the wedding party and to those two as she was officiating, because of course we got the sentimental flashbacks of their stories.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is. I saw somebody else say this, and I'm gonna second it. And I'm sorry I can't remember who said it, but something about Bitsy Tillich's voice breaking tears me up
Hmm.
because when she was talking about the everything that John Henry had sacrificed and everything that he had lost,
Hmm.
her voice broke a little bit
Yeah.
while she was talking about that, and I was like, "Ugh," you know, it
You're right.
was,
Yeah. And she does that a lot when she's talking to the boys or talking about the boys to Clark.
mhm. Yeah,
The vulnerable side of being a mother and
yeah,
not having the answers.
which I think is a good segue because we cannot talk about this show without talking about what you've already mentioned in season three, and that was Lois's fight with cancer. Holy smokes. They could have done nothing else the entirety of season three. And the way that they handled that would have gripped me because they addressed it in such a real way. I feel
Mhm.
like they stripped back everything that was comic booky about it and just they I thought they were as respectful as they possibly could be to people who have actually gone through that.
Yeah,
And I applaud them.
it was gut wrenching to watch that.
Yeah.
And I love that they touched on almost every aspect of it and they didn't have just an easy answer. And I think you can look at it and say how genius, or you could say how obvious it is. How do you how do you come up with a villain for Superman that he can't protect against? And
Yeah.
it's sad that it always goes back to cancer, but like it's the one thing he can't protect her from.
Yeah.
And that's season three, and then you top it off with Doomsday in season four. Like, but the fact that he's helpless, completely helpless, and she gets through it with all of the turmoil going on. And then it's hard to even talk about this without getting choked up. But the gut punch that is the final montage of season four, when he
Yeah.
just says, and then Lois's cancer came back.
Hmm.
It's so hard to hear that after everything they went through in season three, and just like that, it can come back and it undoes everything. But that's how reality is.
Yeah, that's
And
how it works.
it's so hard, and I'm getting choked up thinking about it because it's so hard how that's reality. That is how the terrible disease works. And it's like it's heartbreaking to see, you always expect Superman to outlive everybody, but not in that way. And,
Hmm.
you know, especially after knowing that, you know, Clark was probably supposed to be the one to die earlier after him getting General Lane's heart and all that, to still see him have to say goodbye to Lois. And I mean, we could do a whole episode on the finale in general.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think that was, again, you could argue that it was like a throwaway at the end of the finale, but I don't take it as that. I think it's more of a payoff for what they showed in season three. And payoff is a weird way to say it because but I think it's like an exclamation point on it. Like, we didn't take that lightly. We didn't take her overcoming cancer lightly. We want to show you that in reality, unfortunately, even though she overcame it, it can still come back and it still does you know, it's still
Well,
real.
there are some things I feel like you have to have a certain level of respect for, and you can't just comic book away. And I really respected them for that because it is devastating to hear that in the finale, like you said. And especially through the performance that Tyler Hoechlin gives in that monologue, because you can hear the heartbreak.
Oh yeah.
And that just, oh,
And
oh.
seeing her on her deathbed and
Mhm. Um, since we're there, I want to say I love that this show begins and ends with a monologue from Superman, and that you hear how his journey started, and you get to hear through monologue how his journey ends. I I really appreciate the looking through the lens as we see Superman pass away and him cross over to the afterlife at the end of this show. I love the lens of not just seeing people that he's lost, but versions of people in 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 the bright moments, in the best moments, because
Mhm.
he sees the boys as their younger selves. He sees Lex, and there's that whole forgiveness thing, which I have a point I want to bring up in a second. But
Mhm.
you see Lana and John Henry Irons. You see Kyle Cushing and oh gosh, why am I blanking on her name?
Oh, his wife,
Yeah,
Christy?
Chrissy.
Yeah.
Chrissy. You see Kyle and Chrissy, and then of course you see Lois. I love that. I think it's so interesting that they did that. That he's not just seeing people that are gone, but
Yeah,
people that are still alive.
I had talked about that with you because I have never seen that before. Where when people
Hmm.
go to heaven, this version is more of like a spiritual thing where it's his version of heaven, where or his version of the afterlife, where he's getting everything he wants to experience in the afterlife. So that would include versions of these people that he wants to spend time with, not just the people that are passed on. So it makes sense from that standpoint of more of a spiritual thing than a literal thing.
Hmm.
However you want to take that, I guess, is up for interpretation as any version of the afterlife because none of us really know for sure. Um, and that's where I know you want to talk about Lex. To me, I took it as like in his version of the afterlife, he wants to forgive Lex. So
Yeah,
it's in his mind. Like Lex isn't doing anything. It's in Clark's mind.
sure.
You can say what you want to say about that.
My nitpick, and this is my only nitpick really about the entire finale. Um, and I know they had budget issues. I don't know what the budget issues equated to when they could have people on set or anything like that. I felt that Sam Lane was missing from that finale.
Well, I'll even go a step further now that you're saying Sam Lane, his mom could have been there too.
I thought they could have had his mom there too. Yeah.
You could kind of go there from, I think it's because they probably had to cut out as many actors and actresses from each episode as possible because once they appear in an episode, that probably ups the budget. Because if you notice, it wasn't like their time was shortened, it was they're not in this episode.
Yep. Yep.
So it probably wasn't worth bringing someone back for like a split second.
Sure. But I think what made me linger on it was there's that moment when Lois passes away.
Yeah.
And when he said there's and when Clark says at that moment as she was passing, something happened that I'll never forget. And it's her looking over and saying, Daddy,
Yeah.
clearly telling us that she saw Sam in that moment.
And
I would
that
have,
might be their way of saying they wanted to show
yeah. And it could have been, but I was waiting when she said that. I was waiting to see like Sam's hand
them.
or them panning to him or something like that.
Yeah.
And then I was expecting to see him in the final little clip there. But I'm not going to dwell on that. That's just something that I wish would have been there, but it's okay.
Yeah.
Still amazingly beautiful ending there. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know where to go from there because I'm going to tell you there are moments throughout this series that got me a little choked up with the family dynamics and things like that. I actively cried several times during the final season. Sam Lane's sacrifice got me. Like Lois's guttural scream after that
Yeah.
got me. And then
I mean,
the finale post wedding, I was a mess.
that's the thing is I told you I don't think I've ever cried more watching a show than season three. And then to see the finale make me cry more than the entirety of season three.
Yeah.
was tough because season three, I think I cried every night watching season three. It was hard. Like we had to prepare ourselves to watch Superman and Lois, watching
Yeah.
season three with everything going on with Lois. But the finale of season four, I told you the dumbest thing made me start crying. Um, because I was good for some reason. Something about the relationship between Lana and Kyle always worked for me.
Mm.
And I always, for some reason, like Kyle should not be as sympathetic as he is. In my eyes, I've always come from a standpoint, which is, I don't want to get on my high horse here or anything like that, but like, cheating on your wife, and that's never been something that I've been okay with in any regard. I've never been one to think that that's a forgivable thing. I've never wanted people to be redeemed from something like that. It's just not something I'm okay with. Something about the actor and the way he portrayed the character, it made me sympathetic towards him for some reason, and I could never pinpoint why. And I think like they made that relationship feel real the whole time it was happening. And I think it worked
I
for me
think
for whatever reason.
I think that's exactly what it is. I think it's the actor himself because Eric Valdez killed it as Kyle.
Yeah.
In season 1, I forgot how much I hated him in season 1
Yeah.
until I went back and started watching it, and he is such a dick in
And
in the first part of that season.
and you come to learn he's just pathetic is what it is.
Yeah, and because I mean it's probably because he hated himself at the time.
Hmm.
But yeah, just to see kind of a redemption for him in the series, even though it didn't work out with
Exactly.
his wife. Yeah, you're happy to see it, and I thought it was very fitting that he's the one that was there when Clark,
Yeah.
had his heart attack at the end.
Him and Clark becoming good friends. I love the stupid stuff with like the barbecues and the two of
Yeah,
them busting each other's chops about the meat and everything. Like that was fun. He just became a really likable character, and the redemption thing is the perfect way to pinpoint it. He did feel redeemed, and I also think it's important that they didn't get back together. Like you don't have to. It shows the maturity of the show in that regard, I think, is to say that like their relationship wasn't okay. It didn't work, but they're respectful enough to still be friends, to still co-parent with their daughter. They have two daughters, we're told, right? The second daughter shows up once in a while.
yeah.
Um, I joked about that with my wife, and she's like, I think she was at the wedding at the end. I'm like, I don't even remember.
She was briefly. It's like
Yeah,
glimpse and you miss
yeah.
her. Um, the one moment that I really love from the finale, and I'm good here once we talk about this. The boys get in their suits. I know
Oh,
they
you know what? Wait, I got one more nitpick before you go on that.
okay.
I gotta say, the one nitpick I have is Jordan's suit is so bad.
Oh, his
The
vigilante suit. It's bad. It's really
that
bad.
that is the CW in a nutshell to me. Like there
Yeah.
was no reason for it to look that bad. Like put a ski mask on. Don't overthink it with the goggles or whatever. But whatever. That's all I
Still
gotta
not
say about that.
quite Gotham Final Shot bad, but it's still bad.
But I'll let you talk about the good side of their suits now.
Yeah, so I know this was a fan service moment because they knew they weren't going to be able to do, you know, the kids in the suits because unfortunately they didn't get as many seasons as they wanted or
Hmm.
had planned for. But I love that shot in the finale of
Yeah.
Superman flying with the boys in their suits. You finally get an mostly accurate steel suit, and then
Yeah.
you get Natalie with the Superman crest as well in her suit. That's just
Yep.
I love that shot. It's so
And
good.
then you do get the actual tease from the actor that played John Henry Irons of the actual suit that they didn't get a chance to use,
Oh my
which is
gosh.
heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I will say, I told you this during the final battle with Doomsday when the boys are helping. Right before they start helping, they show the diner and they show they're selling Superman shirts and mugs and stuff in the diner. I really thought they were setting it up for the boys to go take two shirts and put them on and help their dad. I don't care how cheesy or stupid that is. That's what I wanted. I wanted the boys to just grab shirts And like that was their way of saying like they're in and they were gonna go help their dad. So just have a
I mean,
Superman t-shirt. It's right there.
at that point, the cat was out of the bag anyway because everybody knew.
Yeah.
So,
I just thought it would have been cool. I just thought it would have been fun. Like have their shirt rip up or something and then just go
s-
grab another shirt.
speaking of that, what about the scene in the final season where Superman has to reveal himself in the diner
Oh
in
God, how did we not
Smallville?
even talk about that? That I cried during that scene. I I did. There was something about the vulnerability of him knowing that he had no other choice and the repercussions coming from that are like you can't come back from that. There's no coming back from that.
Tyler Hoechlin did so much with body language in that sequence.
Yeah, like
He
his
didn't have to
shoulders
say
just
a
drop.
word.
Like he's just like, oh, like I have to do this.
Yeah. I mean, I think overall, everything out of the show for Tyler Hoechlin to go from someone who I thought was an absolutely ridiculous choice to being probably top two, top three for me, Superman actors. I think
It's stupid
that's
for me to say like the Mount Rushmore of Superman actors because there's probably only a few. Um,
there's more than you think.
yeah, there is. But to me, yeah, he's definitely to me he's top two, and that's no slight to Christopher Reeve. I don't want to be a jerk, and I think it's just I grew up with you know we obviously have a lot of love for Cavill, and then for him to be even in the conversation with
Yeah.
Reeve and Cavill, I think says a lot because we do have such love for Reeve and Cavill. Um, and then you got, you're right, there are more than you realize when you start thinking about it. But I just when you watch the show and you see Superman, you don't see the actor. I think that's what's really cool. And I think what's cool for me is like you see a father. You see Superman as a father on this show. That's
Mm.
where it really worked for me, is seeing him as a father. The relationship with him and Lois and dealing with the kids in different ways was really fun for me too. Um, Dealing with
Uh,
real world problems where like Jonathan I'm sorry, crap, is it Jonathan or Jordan? Um has the girl in his room and Clark's like,
yes.
"What was the problem?" And Lois is the one that's like, "Are you serious?" I love that because it's like the ignorance of like a good boy, and he's like, "What? What's the problem?"
That so
I
again,
laughed
we can
so hard on that scene. That scene was
we can
so
tangent
perfect.
so much. We can
I know.
tangent so much. There's a moment in season two, and I just rewatched it, so I know. So that's how it's popping so fresh to mind. Tyler Hoechlin, man, Hoechlin.
I
There's a
say
scene.
Hecklin, so it doesn't matter.
There's a scene where they're in the truck. Clark, Jonathan, and his girlfriend,
Mhm.
and Jonathan is just not wanting to hear what Clark's saying. They get out of the truck. Jonathan's girlfriend says virtually the same thing. And he's like, thanks,
I
that makes
know
me
what
feel
you're.
so much better.
Is
And
that when he
then
drops his like
in
shoulders
the
and like just huffs? Like, are you kidding me?
in the background, Clark throws his hands up like,
Yes.
what the heck?
And I remember that scene because I remember laughing my ass off because it's such a typical thing with kids. Like,
That he is he is such a good dad in this
yes,
show. I love it.
yep, absolutely perfect. He was the relation. And we should mention too the transition between the two actors playing Jonathan.
Yeah,
Um,
both fantastic work.
it was weird because I was not excited when he changed, when they changed actors, but it I forgot about it pretty quickly. It was a pretty smooth transition. They're different, but not different to the point where it took me out of it.
And I'll say this for Michael Bishop, who took over as Jonathan. As much
Not
as
an
I
easy
enjoy,
thing to do.
no, applause for him. But as good as Jordan Elsis was, I felt that Michael Bishop felt more like Alex Garfin's brother. They look a little more similar. I feel like their dynamic and their chemistry is a little better.
Mhm.
Um, to the point where I mean, they are the fraternals towards the end. I mean, they just that's them.
Isn't the other actor's name Jordan too?
Yeah, Jordan Elsis.
Which is so that's got to be so confusing on set where
Yeah,
Jordan is playing Jonathan.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, we could go on and on and on. Entire cast killed this show. The creators, I mean, even when I thought this was in season one, even when I thought this was going to be a bigger part of the Arrowverse, because we had Diggle show up and everything like that.
Diggle shows
It
up. I want to point out Harrison Wells. You know the not obviously Harrison Wells. What the heck is the actor's name? Um, oh, I'm drawing a blank of Harrison Wells' name, but from The Flash. Oh, Tom Cavanaugh. Tom
Tom
Cavanaugh
Cavanaugh
shows up and plays Gilbert Godfrey. Hilarious. Such fun casting.
and
Um,
directed that episode.
yeah, a lot of fun. You know, with the different characters in the greater DCU, with stuff like that. I know it's funny, and again, not to go on another tangent. Now everything's coming out. Oh, they had it all planned out. They were going to use this character, and they're making like these huge headlines over this. And it's like, guys, not for nothing. Yes, in a Superman show, they wanted to use Superman villains. That's not news to me. Like,
Yeah.
like, yes, they had plans on using other Superman villains. Yes, of course. Like not that big of a deal. Is it heartbreaking because I wanted more seasons? Yeah, sure. But they told a great story in 4 seasons. I didn't want it to go on too long where it lost its luster. I think it went out on top, which is the important thing. Would I have
Yes.
loved to have seen Darkseid? Sure. Would I have loved to have seen Brainiac? Obviously. But I'm okay with what we got. I'm happy with what we got.
I am overjoyed and grateful that they gave this show a final season and they knew that it was the final season and they could write their own ending.
Yeah.
I would have been devastated had we got the cliffhanger at the end of season 3
Oh man.
and not gotten anything else.
Yeah.
Because
People are killing
there was a
James Gunn for
very
canceling the show. Let's praise James Gunn for letting him finish the final season.
because there was a very real possibility that that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Because at the end of season 3, even with the cliffhanger, we didn't know. It had not been renewed. We didn't know. We knew the DCU was coming. So yeah, just I'm so happy with what we got for the finale, and I'm over the moon with this show. But I think we could go on, and we could ramble and ramble and ramble. But I'm going to cut us off there, Joe, because
Nah,
in
that's
the
fine.
interest of not rambling.
Let's
But
not let's go out before we start rambling like they did in season 4.
exactly. But I want to thank you so much. I'm glad that you were there so I could, because this is not the first time that you and I have talked about this show. I think I text you endlessly during the seasons, like after episodes, because I had so much to say about it. So thank you for going along the ride with me, and thank you for doing this episode. Is there any final words you want to say, and then let everybody know where they can find you?
No, I mean I loved the ride this show went on. I mean I think I told you before, my wife and I used to watch all the Arrowverse shows, and then she fell off way quicker than I did, and she doesn't watch a lot of stuff with me anymore. I mean, we got the kids and everything. She's busier now than she was, and um, I as the father, I have more time to watch these shows than she does. Luckily, she's good with that stuff. But this is the show that like we had to sit down together. I never watched this without her. She wanted to watch this show every night when it was on, and for someone that doesn't really watch a lot of superhero stuff anymore, I think that says a lot about the show. And she's not a big Superman person either. Like she just loved this show. So I think that says a lot. She doesn't watch anything else with me really, as far as superhero stuff. So I loved watching this show. I can't wait to own the complete series when it comes out. Looking forward to rewatching it from day one, going through all the special features and everything. I think it's just a fun dive. I think I'm a little bit bitter that it's making me think less of the other Arrowverse shows because this one is so good. That hurts me a little bit. I'm not gonna lie. Especially the Flash. Like the effects on the Flash hurt way more now than they did 6 years ago. But that's not fair to this show. This show is so good. What it did for Superman as a character, another version of Superman. To think we got you know, this little side Superman show while technically Cavill was still Superman. We were going through a little bit of a transition between, Man of Steel and BVS, and then this show came on in 21 after, the Justice League debacle and everything. it's pretty cool that we still had Superman content in live action, and then literally the show ends right before we're getting a live action Superman movie. That's pretty cool. And a pretty damn good version of it that we're probably never going to get another version where he has, twin boys and a wife and seeing all that stuff and all the storylines they went on. And again, I could ramble again for another 20 minutes before I wrap this up, but I'm just really thankful we got the show for what it was. Nitpicks be damned. It's a damn near perfect show. So happy. You know, who knows if we'll ever see Tyler Hoechlin in any capacity again as Superman, but I would take more of him in a heartbeat. So,
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I can put it any better than that. It was a show that I went from not being very excited about to over the moon. Love it. It's one of my favorite DC TV shows or products ever. To the point where I have a 6 scale figure of Tyler Hoechlin Superman.
season
Um,
two, though.
he's not as bulky as he
Yeah.
seems to.
Could have been worse. Could have been the
But
Supergirl version, right?
but yeah, I mean, every kudo I can give to this show, it it deserves it. So I'm gonna miss it. It's something when I can say I'm going to miss a CW superhero show. So
Mhm.
great job, guys. But thank you, Joe. Again, I appreciate it. Tell everybody where they can find you.
I'd be curious. Do you rank this higher than Daredevil?
Don't make me do that.
Hey, the fact that they're even in the same conversation, a Netflix Marvel show that we love, and then a CW Superman show, that's pretty incredible. Just to put you on the spot before I wrap up, but but thank you. This was a lot of fun. I'm glad we got to talk about this show as much as we did. Um, Nothing like, Superman on a Batman podcast, but we had to talk about this show. There was no way around it.
For
So.
sure.
But yeah, you guys can find me. Thank you for listening, whoever's out there listening, and find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, J411, and Facebook as Joe Fornerato, FORNAROTTO.
Awesome. As for myself, you can find my personal accounts on Instagram, X, and Threads and Letterboxd. That's me Carter 89, me Carter 89. The show can be found on Facebook, Instagram, X, and Threads at tfrbatpod. Once again, if you have thoughts or comments, questions for the show, just email those to tfrbatpod@gmail.com. We will read those on the show. We also read Apple podcast reviews. So if you have a way that you want to support the show, the best and easiest way to do that is to leave rating and reviews. We do read those Apple reviews. If you're looking for another way to support the show, and we don't ask that you spend a dime on this show, but if you'd like to, you can go to redbubble.com and search Shop TFR, all one word, and find our logos all over some cool merchandise there. Our theme music was created by the talented Gaurav Venkateswar. His music can be found at gvtunes.com. Don't forget to go to the description in this podcast, go to Organic Price Books, get yourself some goodies, and to support the show as you save money doing so. That's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much, Joe. I'm Eric. Superman and Lois, we're going to miss you, but make sure you keep that bat signal lit and pointed skyward. Batman was created by Bill Finger and Bob Kane and is the sole property of Warner Brothers Discovery. The Fire Rises, a Batman podcast, is in no way associated with DC Comics, DC Studios, or Warner Brothers Discovery. The thoughts and opinions of the participants of this show are their own and do not reflect the companies that they work for. Thank you for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.
I came to this world alone. But when I left it, I had so much. And it was all because of love. It's the thing that makes life worth living. Do everything you can to find love. To give it, to hold on to it. Because life, it goes by so fast.